The year is 2012. A woman named Dr. Eris Thorne sits in a quiet university office. The room smells of old paper and dust. Sunlight streams through the window. It catches the motes of dust dancing in the air. On her screen is a satellite map, a patchwork of greens and browns, the agricultural heartland of the Ohio River Valley. She is a soil historian. She studies the land not by the year, but by the century. She is looking for patterns, anomalies, stories told not in words, but in fence lines and crop yields. Her mouse clicks. She zooms in on a section of land west of Chillicothe. The surrounding farms are predictable. Vast rectangles of corn and soy. Monoculture. Efficient, modern, and vulnerable. But here, in the middle of it all, is something different. A grid of orchards. Perfectly spaced. Intensely green. Over 2,000 acres of it. Apples, peaches, cherries, pears. An oasis of biodiversity. This alone is unusual. But it's not what makes her stop. She pulls up the historical land use data, overlaying it on the map. The orchards were planted in waves. A small patch in the 1950s, another in the 60s, a huge expansion in the 70s and 80s. Each new section planted with different rootstock, different companion plants between the rows. Clover here, alfalfa there, wildflowers in the next block. It looks like a quilt, a deliberate, decades-long experiment. Then she sees the yield data. She leans closer to the screen. The numbers can't be right. For 60 years, these orchards have never had a crop failure. Not through drought, not through blight. Not through the cicada years or the late spring freezes. While surrounding farms went bankrupt, these trees thrived. The productivity is 30% higher than the state average. The input costs are 50% lower. No chemical fertilizers since 1958. Minimal pesticides. It's impossible. It violates the rules of modern agriculture. She pulls up the county property deeds. A single name is attached to all of it. From the first 10 acres to the last 2,000. Thomas Reed. She finds a phone number for the Reed family orchard. A young woman answers. Dr. Thorne explains who she is, explains what she's seeing in the data. She asks, "How is this possible?" There is a pause on the other end of the line. The woman's voice is quiet. She says, "You're asking about my grandfather." She says, "It's because he only had one arm." Dr. Thorne goes silent. Her finger traces the impossible green squares on her screen. One arm. This entire agricultural miracle, this legacy of resilience that defies explanation, was built by a man the world had written off. A man who was once told, with kindness and certainty, that he could not possibly succeed. This channel is for stories like that. The quiet stories of people who were told no, and who spent the rest of their lives turning that no into a quiet, devastating yes. If you believe these are the stories that matter most, subscribe to this channel. Because what happened to Thomas Reed is a story about more than just an orchard. It's a story about the most dangerous limitation there is, the one imposed by someone who genuinely believes they are protecting you. Let's go back to the beginning. March 1952. The air still had the bite of winter. The mud in the farm lanes was deep and cold. Thomas Reed stood in the office of the Ross County Mutual Bank. He was 24 years old. He was tall and thin. His face was serious. He wore a clean but faded work shirt. His left sleeve was empty, pinned neatly at the elbow. The arm was lost to a piece of farm machinery 2 years before. A corn picker. A moment of inattention. A lifetime changed in a single, grinding second. He had spent those 2 years learning the world again, learning to button a shirt with one hand, learning to tie his boots, learning to feel the phantom itch of fingers that were no longer there. He did not feel sorry for himself. Self-pity was a luxury his family could not afford. The farm was small. The margins were thin. His father was getting older. The work had to be done. Across the desk sat Frank Miller, the bank's president. Frank was a good man. Everyone in the county said so. He served on the church board, coached the Little League team. He had known the Reed family for 3 decades. He had gone to school with Thomas's father. His desk was made of dark, heavy oak. On it sat a picture of his wife and 2 sons. He looked at Thomas with an expression of genuine concern, a deep, paternal worry. Thomas had laid out his plan. He wanted a loan, $3,000. He didn't want to farm corn and soy anymore. The work was too hard with one arm. The big tractors were clumsy, dangerous. He wanted to buy the 10-acre plot next to their farm. The soil was sandy loam, perfect for an orchard. He wanted to plant apple trees. He would need the loan for the land, and for the trees, and for a tractor. A specific kind of tractor. An Alice Chalmers Model G, a small, nimble machine. The engine was in the back. The farmer sat out front, with a clear view of the soil. The tools were mounted underneath. It was perfect for cultivating between rows of young trees. Frank Miller listened patiently. He nodded. He steepled his fingers. He let the silence hang in the room for a long time. Then he spoke. His voice was soft, kind. "Tom," he said, "I've known you since you were a boy. I watched you grow up. I have the utmost respect for you and your father." Frank paused. He chose his next words carefully. "Which is why I can't give you this loan." Thomas didn't say anything. He just watched the man's face. Frank leaned forward. "Son, farming is the hardest life there is. I see it every day. I see good men, strong men, with 2 good arms, lose everything. The weather turns, the prices drop. A piece of equipment breaks at the wrong time. It's a razor's edge. You know this. What you're proposing, an orchard, it takes years to see a return. The trees have to mature. The work is constant, pruning, spraying, thinning. It's delicate work. It takes 2 hands. Frank sat back in his leather chair. He let out a slow breath. "I am not going to be the man who puts you and your father into a debt you can't escape. I am not going to finance a dream that will break your heart. It would be irresponsible. It would not be the act of a friend. My answer is no. And it's no because I respect you too much to say yes. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, not by a rival, but by someone who you know cares about you? Someone who wraps their refusal in the language of love and protection. It's a particular kind of pain, because you cannot fight it with anger. You cannot dismiss it as jealousy. It's a quiet, heavy certainty, a judgment delivered with a kind smile, and it is devastating." Thomas Reed felt something in his chest, not anger, not contempt, something softer and in some ways worse, a deep, profound loneliness. He had expected a debate about finances, about collateral, about interest rates. He had not expected a verdict on his own capability, on his wholeness as a man. He stood up. He looked Frank Miller in the eye. He said just 2 words. "I understand." Then he turned and walked out of the bank. The bell over the door chimed softly as it closed behind him. Let me know in the comments if you've ever faced that kind of moment. That quiet, well-intentioned refusal. Because what Thomas did next is a lesson for anyone who has ever been underestimated. He drove the family's old Ford pickup home. The truck rattled over the gravel roads. He didn't tell his father right away. They did the evening chores in silence, fed the chickens, milked the 2 cows. The rhythm of the work was familiar, comforting. Later, at the kitchen table, under the glow of a single bare bulb, he told him. He relayed the conversation with Frank Miller, word for word. He didn't add any emotion to it. He just reported the facts. His father, a man of few words, listened. His hands were calloused and stained with the earth. He stirred his coffee. The spoon made a small scraping sound against the ceramic mug. When Thomas was finished, his father looked up. His eyes were clear. He said, "Frank is a good man. He's just certain about things he doesn't understand. He thinks he knows what a man can do. He only knows what he can do." There was a long silence. The old clock on the wall ticked. Then his father stood up. He walked to a small locked chest in the corner of the room. He unlocked it. He came back to the table with a metal coffee can. It was heavy. He pried the lid off. Inside was cash. Old bills, folded and tightly packed. Years of careful saving. Money set aside for a crisis, for a new roof, for a doctor. He pushed the can across the table toward Thomas. "This is what's left. It's not enough for the land and the tractor. It might be enough for one of them." His father looked at him. "They took your arm. They didn't take your mind. And they didn't take the dirt. The dirt is enough. We'll find another way." The next Saturday, Thomas saw an ad in the local paper. Estate auction. At the old Vance farm 5 miles down the road. Arthur Vance had passed away. A quiet man, a bachelor. He had kept to himself. The ad listed farm equipment, plows, discs, a hay rake, and at the bottom of the list, 2 words, Alice Chalmers G. Not running. Thomas felt a flicker of something. He drove the pickup to the auction. The farm was overgrown. The paint was peeling on the barn. A small crowd of farmers had gathered. They were picking over the larger equipment, the big John Deeres and farmalls. Nobody was paying attention to the little tractor. It was parked behind the barn, half hidden by weeds. It was smaller than he remembered. The orange paint was faded to a pale rust. The tires were cracked and flat. The engine was covered in grease and bird droppings. It looked like a forgotten toy. He walked around it. He saw the brilliance of the design, the simplicity, the way it was built for a human being to see their work, to be close to the soil. The auctioneer started. The big tractors went for high prices. The farmers were bidding against each other. Finally, the auctioneer pointed to the little Alice Chalmers. "All right, what am I bid for this little thing?" he said. "Let's start at $100. Silence. The farmers chuckled. One of them shouted, "You'd have to pay me to haul it away." $50? The auctioneer asked. $25? Thomas held up a hand. $100, he said. His voice was firm. The auctioneer looked surprised. "I've got 100. Do I hear 150? Silence. Another farmer turned to look at Thomas. He saw the pinned sleeve. He shook his head and looked away. "Going once?" the auctioneer said. "Going twice?" "Sold. For $100 to the young Mr. Reed." Thomas felt another $75 leave his pocket for an old flatbed trailer. He spent the rest of the day wrestling the dead tractor onto it. By nightfall, it was sitting in his own barn, a monument of rust and ruin. His father came out to look at it. He walked a slow circle around the machine. He kicked one of the flat tires. He said, "Well, son, you got your tractor. Now you just have to build it." And that's what he did. For the next 6 months, Thomas Reed rebuilt that machine. He worked by the light of a single bulb hanging from a rafter. He started with the engine, a 4-cylinder Continental. He took it apart, piece by piece, laid the parts out on a clean canvas sheet, pistons, rings, bearings, valves. He cleaned every part in a bucket of gasoline, scrubbed them with a wire brush until they shone. He used the money from the coffee can to order new gaskets, new seals, new spark plugs. He learned the engine inside and out. He learned the feel of worn metal, the smell of old oil. He put it back together with the care of a watchmaker. He did it all with one hand, and a series of clamps and vices his father helped him rig up. It was slow, frustrating. He dropped bolts, he scraped his knuckles, but he never stopped. Then he moved to the transmission, the steering, the brakes. He replaced the rotten tires, rewired the electrical system. He bought a book on welding, taught himself how to lay a clean bead. He patched the holes in the rusted metal, and as he worked, he wasn't just rebuilding the machine, he was redesigning it. He knew he couldn't operate the clutch with his foot, and the throttle with his right hand, and the steering wheel at the same time. So he started to invent. He moved the throttle from a foot pedal to a hand lever on the steering column. He designed a new clutch linkage, a long steel rod that he could operate with his right knee. He spent a week forging a special lock for the steering wheel, a hinged steel clamp with a quick-release lever. It would allow him to lock the wheels in a straight line, freeing his one hand to adjust the cultivators underneath. This was the key. This was the invention that would make everything possible, the physical artifact of his ingenuity. He was building a tractor that only he could operate, a machine that was an extension of his own body. One day, he was working on the toolbox. It was mounted on the frame behind the seat. It was rusted shut. He took a crowbar and pried it open. The hinges screamed. Inside was a mess of old, rusty tools, a broken wrench, a socket filled with spider webs. But underneath the tools, he saw something else, an old oilskin envelope, taped to the bottom of the box. It was addressed in faded ink, "To whoever finds this." His fingers trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside were two things, a letter and a set of hand-drawn mechanical sketches. He unfolded the letter first. The handwriting was neat, precise. "My name is Arthur Vance," it began. "If you are reading this, I am gone, and you have bought my tractor. I hope you got it for a fair price. I bought this machine in 1948. I had big plans for it. I lost my right arm in the war, in France. I came home and thought I could still farm. This little tractor, the Model G, it seemed like the answer. But I couldn't make it work. I couldn't afford to have it modified, and nobody would help me. They said it was a fool's errand. They said I should sell the farm and move to the city. Maybe they were right. I never got my orchard planted. I spent my evenings in the barn trying to figure out how to make it work with one hand. These drawings, they are my ideas. A hand throttle, a knee clutch, a lock for the steering. I don't know if they will work. I never got the chance to build them. I hope they are of some use to you. Don't let them tell you what you can't do. The dirt is patient. It will wait for you. Sincerely, Arthur Vance." Thomas sat down on an overturned bucket. He looked at the drawings. They were almost identical to the modifications he had just spent months inventing on his own. The knee clutch, the hand throttle, the steering lock, it was all there, drawn with a careful, steady hand. He wasn't alone. He had never been alone. Another man, a ghost in this same barn, had walked this path before him, had faced the same problem, the same doubt. Thomas carefully folded the letter and the drawings. He put them in his shirt pocket. He felt a strange connection, a debt to a man he had never met, a quiet promise to finish what Arthur Vance had started. 2 weeks later, the tractor was finished. He had painted it bright Alice Chalmers orange. It looked new. He filled the tank with gasoline, checked the oil. He climbed into the seat. His father stood by the barn door, watching. Thomas took a deep breath. He turned the key. The starter whirred. The engine sputtered. It coughed a plume of blue smoke, and then it caught. A low, steady rumble filled the barn, the sound of resurrection. Thomas engaged the new knee clutch, shifted into first gear. He released the clutch. The little tractor rolled forward out of the barn and into the sunlight. His father didn't smile. He just nodded once. A small, sharp gesture of approval. It was more than enough. Thomas didn't have the money for the 10-acre plot. Not yet. But he had his machine. He spent that fall and the next spring doing work for other farmers. He couldn't run a big plow, but his little tractor was perfect for other jobs. Cultivating vegetable gardens, mowing fence lines, clearing brush. Jobs the big farmers didn't want to do. He charged a fair price. He worked from sunup to sundown. He saved every dollar. The other farmers watched him. At first, they were skeptical. Some of them laughed, called his machine a toy. But they saw the quality of his work, the straightness of his rows, the care he took. They saw a man who did not make excuses. The laughter stopped. It was replaced by a grudging respect. By the fall of 1954, he had saved $2,000. He went to see the owner of the 10-acre plot, an old man named Henderson. Henderson wanted $3,000 for the land. Thomas offered him $2,000 in cash, and a promise to work off the other $1,000. He would plow Henderson's garden every spring, mow his fields every summer, for as long as it took. Henderson looked at the young man with one arm. He saw the determination in his eyes. He had heard the stories about him. He stuck out his hand. "You've got a deal, son." Thomas Reed now owned 10 acres of dirt. He spent that winter clearing the land. In the spring of 1955, he planted his first apple trees. 150 of them. He planted them farther apart than the books recommended, so his little tractor could easily pass between them. He used Arthur Vance's drawings and his own experience to build a new set of tools. A one-handed pruning shear with a long handle. A special harness for the small sprayer he bought. Everything was adapted. Everything was custom. Born from necessity. The community was split. Some people admired him. His neighbor to the east, a farmer named George, came over one day. He said, "Tom, I saw what you're doing. My father told me your grandfather once helped him save a harvest. He brought his team of horses over in the middle of the night, helped bring the wheat in before a storm hit. If you ever need a hand, you just ask." But others doubted. They saw it as a fool's project, a waste of good land. He'd hear them talking at the feed store. An orchard? With one arm? He'll never make it. Those trees will be dead in 5 years. He's just stubborn. Frank Miller, the banker, would drive past the Reed farm every Sunday. On his way home from church, he'd slow his big Buick down. He'd look over at the 10 acres of saplings, tiny sticks in neat rows. He'd see Thomas out there on his little orange tractor, cultivating the soil between the trees. Frank felt something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't regret. He still believed he had made the right decision, the kind decision. It was a sense of confusion, a feeling that he was watching a story unfold that he did not understand. He never stopped. He never waved. He just watched from a distance, the quiet witness. For 5 years, Thomas cared for those trees. He pruned them, watered them, fought off the insects and the blight. He did it all himself, with his one hand and his one tractor. In the fall of 1960, he had his first real harvest. The apples were perfect, crisp and sweet. He didn't have a fancy packing shed. He sold them from a stand at the end of his driveway. People came from all over the county. They had been watching him for years. They were curious. They tasted the apples. They bought a bushel. Then they came back for more. By the end of the season, he had sold every single apple. He paid off the rest of his debt to Mr. Henderson. He had $2,000 left over. Cash. This is where the story begins to accelerate, where the quiet work of one man becomes a force of nature. The rhythm of the next 40 years was set. Work, harvest, profit, expand. 1962. He bought another 20 acres from a retiring farmer. Cash. He planted peaches. He learned that planting clover between the rows of trees fixed nitrogen in the soil. It also attracted beneficial insects. He didn't need to buy fertilizer. 1968. The farm next door went up for sale. The one owned by the man who had laughed at his toy tractor. The man had gone deep into debt for a massive new combine. A single bad harvest had wiped him out. Thomas bought the 80-acre farm. Cash. He planted cherries and pears. He started experimenting with intercropping, planting rows of nitrogen-fixing shrubs between the fruit trees. The soil got richer every year. Frank Miller kept driving by on Sundays. He saw the first orchard thrive. He saw the second one planted. He saw the third. The original 10 acres had become 110. The little orange tractor was still the only machine Thomas owned. 1975. A severe drought hit the region. Cornfields turned to dust. Soybean plants withered. Farmers were selling off their cattle. The government declared it a disaster area. Thomas's orchard survived. The deep roots of the trees, encouraged by his no-till methods, found water deep in the earth. The rich, organic soil held moisture like a sponge. While others were losing their farms, he had a bumper crop. He bought another 300 acres that year, from the bank. Frank Miller had to sign the papers. He looked at the sale documents. The price was low. The purchase was in cash. He slid the papers across the desk to Thomas. He couldn't meet his eyes. "Congratulations, Tom," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. Thomas just nodded. He signed the deed. He didn't gloat. He didn't say, "I told you so." His success was statement enough. The quiet devastation of his presence in that office, a wealthy man buying land from the banker who refused him a tiny loan, was absolute. Through the 80s and 90s, the expansion continued, year after year, acreage after acreage, cash, cash, cash. He finally bought a second tractor, then a third. But he always kept the little Alice Chalmers G. He used it himself for the delicate work. He hired people. He taught them his methods. He built a packing house, a cider press, a cold storage facility. He became one of the largest employers in the county. Frank Miller retired in 1990. His son, a young man with an MBA, took over the bank. Frank spent his retirement on his front porch, watching the world go by. Sometimes he would see the big trucks with Reed Family Orchard painted on the side, rolling down the highway filled with produce. He passed away in 2005. He never spoke to Thomas Reed again. Then came the reckoning. The year was 2008. A new kind of blight swept through the Midwest, a virulent fungus that attacked fruit trees. It was resistant to all the common fungicides. It devastated the conventional orchards, the ones that had been praised for their modern methods. Thousands of acres of trees died. The bank, now run by Frank Miller's son, held the loans on most of those farms. The farmers defaulted. The bank was on the verge of collapse. One Tuesday morning, a car pulled into Thomas Reed's driveway. A young man in a suit got out. It was Frank Miller's son. Thomas was in the barn, working on the old Alice Chalmers. He was in his 80s now, but he still moved with a quiet purpose. The young banker stood in the doorway. He seemed nervous. "Mr. Reed," he said, "my name is David Miller." Thomas wiped his hand on a rag. He knew who he was. "I need to talk to you," David said. They sat on 2 old wooden crates in the barn. The smell of oil and earth hung in the air. David Miller explained the situation. The blight, the defaulted loans, the crisis. He said, "Your orchards are the only ones that weren't affected. We've had scientists out here. They say it's your soil, your biodiversity, the methods you've been using for 60 years. He paused. He looked at the old man. "Mr. Reed, my father was wrong. He was wrong about you. He was wrong about everything. He thought he was being kind, but he was just being blind. I'm not here to ask for money. The bank is probably going to fail. Maybe it should. I'm here to ask for something more important. I'm here to ask for knowledge. Will you teach us? Will you teach the other farmers how you did this, so that this never happens again?" Thomas Reed looked at the young man. He saw his father's eyes, the same look of certainty, just a different kind. He thought about the decades of quiet work, the loneliness of being right when the whole world is sure you are wrong. He thought about Arthur Vance, the man who never got to plant his trees. He finally spoke. His voice was low and steady and carried the weight of 60 years. "Your father didn't cost me money. He cost me the assumption of my own humanity. He looked me in the eye and told me my body was a liability. He told me I was broken. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind is the loneliest fight there is." Thomas stood up. He walked over to the little orange tractor. He placed his hand on the fender he had painted himself. "The knowledge isn't in me. It's in the dirt. It's in the trees. It's in the clover. I just listened. You want to learn? Go home and listen to the land. It will tell you everything you need to know. But that's not the end of the story. Because a legacy is not what you build for yourself. It's what you build for others." Thomas Reed did help the other farmers. He held workshops. He shared his methods freely. He helped them rebuild their orchards with resilient, diverse practices. He saved the bank. Not because he owed them anything, but because he knew a community needs its heart. He started a foundation, the Arthur Vance Grant, a yearly scholarship given to a disabled farmer or a veteran who wants to start a farm. It provides them with money, equipment, and mentorship. To date, it has helped over 200 people start their own farms. 200 people who might have been told no by a man like Frank Miller. His own grandchildren now run the orchard. They use the same methods he did. They are expanding into new markets. They are teaching his techniques at agricultural universities. Dr. Eris Thorne, the soil historian, published a paper on the Reed orchard. It won a national award. It changed the way scientists thought about sustainable agriculture. It proved that the most resilient systems are often the most diverse, and the most innovative solutions often come from the margins, from the people who are forced to find another way. The old Alice Chalmers Model G sits in the County Historical Museum now. It's parked on a polished concrete floor under soft lights. Next to it, in a glass case, is an oilskin envelope and a set of hand-drawn sketches. On the wall above it is a simple plaque. It tells the story of Thomas Reed and Arthur Vance. But the most important part of the display is something else. It's the steering lock, the one Thomas forged himself in 1952. It's mounted on a piece of dark wood. You can see the hammer marks on the steel, the worn spot where his hand rested for thousands of hours. It's not just a piece of metal. It's a symbol. Proof that the only limitations that truly matter are the ones you accept. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is sitting in an office, across from a person who is kind and decent and certain, and they are being told no. They are being told they are not strong enough, not smart enough, not whole enough. They are being protected from their own dream. This story is for them. The story of Thomas Reed is a reminder that kindness without belief is a cage, and that the most powerful response to doubt is not an argument. It is decades of quiet, relentless work. It is the soil that gets richer every year. It is the orchard that stands when all the others have fallen. It is a legacy written not in words, but in the earth itself. If this story means something to you, if you know someone who needs to hear it, someone who is facing their own Frank Miller, share it with them. And subscribe to this channel for more stories of the quiet fighters, the forgotten innovators, and the patient dirt that waits for us all. Tell us in the comments, who was your Frank Miller, and how did you prove them wrong?